almost. We've skipped
Green light.
Thank you very much indeed for attending tonight's full council meeting. We've got excessive attendance. Apologies for absence. We've got one apology for absence from David Fuller. Are we all happy to accept that?
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. 22-102 declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary or any other interest in any shape or form before?
Item 22116. I'm on the committee of the on my next
Thank you very much indeed. David?
I think in view of the fact we might end up talking about the museum, we want to declare that I'm one of the council trustees on the museum.
And we've also got who are our trustees. David Fields are here.
David Valley.
As of course, as always, if we come across something when we get there, just let us know. I'm sure that's fine. 22-103 minutes of previous meeting. From here, we've all seen copies or had copies, not been able to see them.
Can I share yours, please?
Is there anything
to
raise from anything?
It's unfashionable.
Or is everyone happy that I've signed them? Obviously, we've got a lot on the agenda today, so I'm going to pace through things as quickly as possible. So David proposing, anyone going to second that I sign the meeting? Yep. Everyone okay with that? Thank you very much indeed. Um, 22-104, more good news. To consider and approve co-option of councillors to Amble Town Council. We have one council option here, Lita Gray, who we have another impressive CV to consider. Depressingly impressive. Is there any questions or anything like that before we decide whether to co-opt Lita to the council? No? Fantastic. Well, I'm happy to propose that we do co-opt Lita to the council. Does anyone want to second that? Val, thank you very much indeed. Are we all okay to vote on that? Lovely, thank you very much. Lisa, congratulations. That was easy. Gift horses, no.
Sign date
Lovely. So, just to remind me, Emma, Lita can't vote tonight.
No, no.
She can
She can take part,
talk and
speak,
do
yeah.
it. Lita, welcome. Thank you very much for putting yourself forward. It's nice to have so many people around the room. 22-105, public participation. 22-106, consideration of requests from interested parties. Nothing. Look at that first page gone already. 22-107, report from the NNC Ward Councillor.
Haven't got anything.
Okay, so there we go. 21-108, town matters. It says there to receive an update from Fletfield Association, but there's nothing from.
Yes.
There's something Paul Evelyn was quite keen to raise, something which the Mayor's report had a meeting on the 31st of January, which I'll come to in a second. And that's it, we're just waiting on the process now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Cool. 22-109. First item, Mayor's report. Sorry, it was a bit late, but one of the items on it was the exciting LAPS meeting that took place last week, which Rupert was at as well. Just a couple of things to run through on it. We're going to come to the 20 mile an hour limit. The Maverick meeting, we talked about the skate park meeting now. It's just a matter of finding large sums of money from the grant funding, but we've had some sort of planning approved on the skate park, which is great. Christmas market, huge thanks to everyone who took part, particularly the staff, for getting it all sorted. You were out early in the morning and out late at night, not as late as the traffic marshals were. And at the bottom of that page, there's a map showing the lap. Rupert and I were at this meeting on Friday. It started as an integrated care meeting, and I can give you a rough highlight of what the meetings were, but it basically seems to be an opportunity under the auspices of Northumberland for various bodies to come together and start directing Northumberland services, primarily through the integrated healthcare system, but not exclusively. So at the end of 2 hours, we were talking about minibuses, almost exclusively about minibuses. There were some great quotes. My favourite one was developing a golden thread from communities to decision makers. It sounded fantastic. But in all these things, the problem is getting the decision maker in the room. And I left the meeting, and Rupert, I think maybe had the same feeling, that it sounds great. It's a good idea to get different bodies within rural East Northampton will be to work together, but I'm not sure how effectively it's going to deliver things. So the next few months will be pretty important, I suppose. And then finally, at the bottom of there's the meeting about, the note about the meeting that OBA have invited Helen Harrison, Jason Smithers and Charlie Best to on the 31st of July to talk about various things, including transport needs and it sounds a good opportunity. Hopefully by then our draft transport study with all the data in will be live. I spoke to TPP finally today, and something should be available for us to present. But it'd be great if there's many people to come to the 31st of January as possible. Thank you very much indeed. 22-10902, the clerk's report. Emma, anything?
There is the first report from the coffee machine.
So we have the coffee machine showing the numbers, having had the coffee machine talk at me about an hour ago. It's very exciting. Numbers look relatively good. Any questions or queries on the clerk's report at all? No? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. 22-10903, consider OTC hosting the food festival previously run by Creative Outlook.
Yes, originally we'd sort of said no about that because we were going to be helping with the vintage fair, and we also thought there was going to be a little bit more involved with the coronation, but it sounds as if the coronation is going to, whatever we do, is going to be a little bit more low key, and the vintage festival is not happening. So with that in mind, we did think, because we've got the model that we use for the Christmas market, which is very similar, it might, if you wanted us to, we would be in a position as staff to be able to go ahead and put that on. We did have a conversation with Rowan, and she said that if whatever help she could give, she would. Because she was, quite passionate that it continued in the form that it was. So it's really, if you're happy with that being another event that we put on.
So the issue is therefore, what are our thoughts on us running a food festival?
Can I just be reminded of the date?
It's in June.
Approximately June.
I can't remember the exact date at the
So it's
moment.
kind of like
I
half
think
the
it's
year
something like the
away.
17th, or I might.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about that, but I'll come back to that.
No, I was just wondering if Creative Outlook was looking to drop that from their banner. Are they wanting?
They have done,
Right, okay, so that, okay,
yes.
thank you.
As far as I'm aware, they have done, haven't they?
Jeremy?
Well, just, I'm not sure it's in the interest or not, but I'm a trustee of Creative Outlook. That person's name is Max. And it's not necessarily permanently being dropped, but we just don't have the resources to do
I
it this
see.
year.
Okay.
So it depends on what happens in the future, whether Creative Outlook is able to re-establish itself as just a bit more.
So it would be a help this year
It
therefore?
will certainly be helpful. this
Yeah,
year.
I mean, we would be happy to hand it back.
Yeah, okay.
But we just thought we would be in more of a position than we were when Jerry and I had a first conversation about it. We would be able to run it either until, Creative Outlook were able to take it back again.
Well, two thoughts. One, it's always more difficult, it seems to me, to get things going again if they've lapsed for a year or two. Secondly, you only have to walk around this town on the day of the Christmas market to see how well these things can be done, the buzz in the town, the feedback subsequently. Frankly, I would be mad not to try and ensure that we kept it going. And if the opportunity is there to do it this year and potentially hand it back to Creative Angle, then I'd certainly be more than happy if we did.
John?
I think it's been asked. I had a question about resources. I don't know how much it would take or how long it would take in terms of resource and manpower. But you already said you've got the capacity to take on this additional project within the council
Because
staff.
in effect, it's rolling out the Christmas fair a second time.
Yes, only in better weather.
Better
But
weather.
weather wasn't too bad.
Who knows?
Who knows?
We don't start in the dark and end in the dark.
There are Indian.
Yeah, three things. First of all, I should also declare I'm a trustee of Creative Angle. The second thing is that although Rowan has unfortunately made the decision to leave and we can't replace her in the short term, she has left with a very full account of what needs to be done if there were to be a food festival. So, there is a list of traders who are ready and willing to come, so to speak, which will hopefully minimise the administration should Emma and her team take it on. And thirdly, although we've lost Rowan, we haven't lost a large number of volunteers who in the past have always worked in a number of capacities during the food festival. I'm quite sure that they would come together, whether it be the town council organising it or Creative Angle.
Excellent. It seems like we're in quite a good place. It's like an IKEA food festival, put it all together and it'll work nicely. Are there any voices against? Do we need to vote for this or can we just murmur?
No, if you're happy for us to continue, we'll
Really happy.
start in the new year.
One question from me. Does it have to be in June?
Yes, well, that's the date.
Because I can't go.
Yeah, because I think that is, I think
I
it
just
always
sit in my
has
classroom
been.
looking sad here when I was having a play outside.
It has been, but that doesn't mean it has to be. Of course, we're slightly limited this year, pushing it forward because of all the things happening in May. And the reason it's normally happened in June because of the other activities happening in July.
Yeah, and I think,
Well-
you also have to take into consideration the traders, because
Yeah,
the minute you put something else on, they've got stuff happening
precisely.
elsewhere, so it's in their
I
diary.
would hesitate to move the date because most of the traders will actually already have that date.
So you're saying that everyone else's needs are greater than mine? Sorry about that. Well, okay, so Emma,
Mhm.
thank you to you and your team for putting your hand up on this one. That sounds great. I'll enjoy looking at it.
Can we perhaps get some brownie points by actually flagging up in the town that we are ensuring that it continues at a time when Creative Angle are unable to do so?
That's a good idea. Yeah, so we can throw that around in the advertisement.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. 22-109, to receive a report of the Christmas market issue. We've all had a report on this, including, I spoke to the traffic warden concerned, who was very excited by his little ride on the bonnet of the car, I think he said it was. But obviously there's some concern about local people that live here ignoring the system. It's a very small number, but clearly it's an issue.
I mean, I have seen CCTV of one of the incidents, and it was really dangerous.
Yeah, no, I understand. Because they all then got body cams, didn't they, the traffic marshals after?
Don't think they have, no,
No,
but
the two I spoke to have been given body cameras for exactly that reason. apparently.
it was not good at all. And I mean, the things that I witnessed was not good either.
John?
Given the severity of the incidents, what action has been taken? We've had action, the incidents reported.
Mhm.
What are we doing about it?
Well, that's what we're to talk about, I suppose. We've got CCTV from
Yeah.
right above.
And Lisa spoke to NNC,
Mhm.
and they said because the one-way system was in place, the road closure was in place, we really should report it to the police as well. So she was going to go back to our marshals and see if they were happy for us to do that.
Because presumably if you've got CC, sorry.
I was going to say, actually, I'm surprised we haven't reported to the police. I think a PTSO or a police officer calling around to the individuals, because if we've got a license plate, we know who they are. I think a knock on the door and this is not acceptable should be, the minimum I would have thought.
Absolutely. Do we need better signage in the future, just to explain?
The signs are there.
No, but to explain that it's not just us having ordinances,
No, I think
it's highly.
Look, we put the regulations are done, the timing's done, that then allows the road to be closed in the course of the road traffic law. And then that's it.
And the marshalling is
the marshaling's done for that purpose, for road people's safety.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
anybody abuses it, it's straightforward, if there's a collision, it's a collision.
Mm.
And as I say, that should be, as we've already said, that should be reported, and then the appropriate authorities take the appropriate action against that driver. It might not lead to a prosecution, but at least it then might just remind individuals that, the Road Traffic Act is there to be adhered to.
So I don't know who First Reaction Security are, were they employed by us to look after?
I imagine they're the ones who are employed at the school. It's-
So have we talked to that company about the action
Have
they're
you been
doing?
in touch with the First Reaction?
Haven't been in touch with the school as of yet.
Have you been in touch with First Reaction though?
No, because obviously we have seen the CCTV,
Yeah.
but we haven't, the police really need to be contacted first. And then if they want to see the CCTV, then we will send it to them and then they will act.
Cool. Okay, so do we need to report it to the police or the marshals need to report it to the police?
Well, that's what Lisa was doing. She was going to speak to the marshals and say this is what we were thinking. Because obviously it would be better if the person who was there or was certainly available to be spoken to if the police wanted a bit more information.
Just very quick, anyone can report a crime to the police at any point. Like,
Online.
that's an online system, yeah, exactly. It's very easy.
So the sooner the better.
Yeah,
Well, and second that, I work on Blacktop Lane and some of the things that you see down that road is barbaric. So I wish people would report it more, actually.
Rather just picking up on my last point, can we again use our own social media to report the fact that we've reported these incidents to the appropriate authorities, which might at least put off some other people who might be tempted to behave in a similar way next year?
We were going to put something in the advertiser along those lines, but one of our comms members didn't think it would be appropriate, so we didn't.
There was a conversation, wasn't there, about whether 10,000 road users had got it right and 5 or 10 had got it wrong, whether we should tell them off. But informing everyone that we have reported to the police is a smart way.
The issue is that we will not have been the only people to witness this incident. It just is, not only has to be done, it has to be seen to be done. And other people witnessed this incident, and I can't believe nobody else. I can't believe that nobody else would not witnessed it. We need to report it. It needs to be said that we've reported it, because it links also to the behaviour of people on market day, trying to get into park their cars before the trailers are packed up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, it's a matter of, you send an article out to 3,000 households, most of them haven't done these things.
Facebook.
It's how the wording of the message is.
Yes.
I wonder if it's a softer approach on social media rather than the advertiser.
Yeah.
That actually putting it out.
Possibly, but then that doesn't necessarily reach everyone.
It's more immediate.
Cool. Okay, so we'll report to the police
Yeah.
and comms can look at, because in a way, the good news about the food festival and the fact that we're in one way, and this year we have to report to the police. Is adhered to it. Next time is a sort of positive sandwich. Isn't it? Right, thank you very much. And thanks to the marshals. The ones I spoke to were, as always, very good humoured, and lots of people were gesticulating their support for the Morgan system. And they took it all very well. 22-10905, to consider a request to obtain a storage container for traffic signage and cones This is down in,
Camps Car Park, yeah.
Isn't it?
I think it started, it was talked about before,
It was pre-COVID, I think.
pre-COVID. I think estates looked at it, but then obviously COVID happened, and I think it was just when signs and barriers were being put away, Philip just sort of raised it again.
Do we have an idea of cost and size?
I do. So, yeah, I mean, this is just for everyone's information. A lot of the councils, a lot of town council signage, which is posts and other cones, etc., were originally owned by Amble Carnival and the Vintage Festival, and those organisations gave them to the town council so they could be used by anyone who needed it for around the town. Philip stores it in his car park, but at the moment just loose, so it's just sitting around, leaning around against the walls or whatever. He would like a 20-foot container to be purchased to store it, which would A, would mean it's tidily put away, and B, would mean it's safe and sound and not going to disappear. And he's purchased one previously for himself, and it cost him £3,500 plus VAT delivered.
Not cheap.
Not cheap.
Gosh, I got one for it for a while ago. Jamie?
We were talking in the States recently about using this space outside here, I forget which side, that side.
Yep.
For lawnmowers, etc.
Mhm.
Would it not be a good usage for the time being, potentially, for this?
Could be as well.
It would still be outside.
Almost.
Can do.
Was-
It's
was
just
the point-
easier down there because it's easier. It's more central to move them
Yeah.
out.
It's
So
in
it's
the
in the
town
centre
centre
as well.
Yeah.
up here. So
Okay, got you. Fair enough.
Is it worth us trying to get a quote for the next meeting and see how much?
Yeah, can
Certainly we can get them. I got one £400, but I sent it to Kenya. So,
Well, it looks like one quote.
I'm just reporting what.
Yeah.
Philip sent in an email.
So I mean, I would
Depends on the
imagine that
quality
we're
of the
possibly
container.
looking at that sort. I can't imagine it being vastly different.
so let's maybe get some quotes and ideas for the next meeting and see where
Yeah.
that takes us. Lovely. 22-10906, appoint OCC councillor as museum trustee and approve the museum trust constitution. David, do you want to-
Yeah, well, in the absence of Councillor Fuller, who's one of the trustees appointed to the Museum Trust by this council, and who's also chair of the Museum Trustees. I should perhaps explain that historically, the museum, when it was set up, had a constitution which provided for there to be 8 trustees, 4 of whom would be from the council, the mayor, the deputy mayor, and 2 others, and 4 that would be appointed by other bodies. One of those bodies initially was the Wildlife Trust. I'm not quite sure how that happened, it was. And another was the Historic Buildings Group, neither of which one ceased to exist and the other one ceased to want to do it. So there were some changes, and essentially you've got members of the Museum Management Committee on there, and members from the Historical Society on there, and from Midland. And we carried on operating under the original constitution for about the last, for 30 years or whatever it is now. It became increasingly obvious that there were issues around that, because on the face of it, trustees could end up personally liable, and certainly the other bodies felt that they were going to struggle to get people to actually put their head above the parapet. They felt that probably Amble Town Council would stand behind its trustee representatives, but they might be more vulnerable. So a decision was taken to go down the incorporated charitable organisation front. That decision was taken a good couple of years ago. Suffice it to say, it's been a long and tortuous process, but that is ongoing. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. In terms of the 4 trustees, 18 months, 2 years ago, it was suggested that it wasn't entirely helpful to have the mayor, the deputy mayor, and 2 people serving as council trustees, because the mayor tends to change every year. The mayor hasn't actually changed in the last 2 years, but generally the mayor has changed every year. And therefore potentially so as the deputy mayor and so on. And they felt that it would be better if the council appointed 4 representatives at the start of its year in May, immediately following elections, who would serve for a 4-year term that coincided with their term as councillor. So that's what we did in May 2021. We appointed 4 representatives, which were Councillor Fuller, myself, Councillor Chesser, and the late Councillor King. Councillor King tendered his resignation, and then, as we all know, very sadly, died not that long thereafter. And it is his position that we are looking to try and fill, and that appointment would last from now until the end of our council year. At our last full council meeting, Councillor Shura very kindly agreed, possibly because his arm was being twisted unmercifully, but nevertheless he agreed, given his background, to come along to the Museum Trust meeting, observe and see whether he was prepared to join us. And he did. And as far as I'm aware, he's still happy to join us.
Yes,
On that basis, I'd be more than happy to propose that Councillor Shura becomes our 4th council representative.
and they seem to be happy that I should join as well.
Yet we were delighted. So if I could formally propose that.
I will happily second it. So are we okay to vote on Max becoming the 4th trustee? Thank you very much indeed.
And just by way of a continuing update, the charitable incorporated organisation thing is taking a lot longer than we anticipated. And when we went to the charity commissioners, it then appeared that we'd have to go through the whole process of re-registering charity. So that is now being sorted out. But on the basis that the council was involved with the original constitution, not least because I drew it up, albeit it was 4 years ago that I care to think about, it was felt that this council should approve the new constitution. I can say that at a special meeting of the trustees held last Monday, they approved this new constitution unanimously. And I rather hope that this council will back that, on the basis that if you don't, you're probably going to spend the next X number of months having further arguments about where we go and how we do it. So the thinking is that if this council then adopts it, we'll press ahead early in the new year to try and sort out this charitable incorporated organisation. And all of that needs to be done because the museum is based in the courthouse. The landlord of the museum of the courthouse just happens to be Anchor Town Council. The lease ran out some considerable time ago. The museum is holding over. The museum needs to have a new lease because that will enable it to access grant funding. So it's been keen to get on with it, but it can't get on with it until it's got its constitution sorted out because the new lease needs to reflect that and then get rid of the potential liability, personal liability of trustees. So I perhaps, having declared an interest in a sense in this, also propose that this council approves the revised constitution for the museum.
I'll second that.
We're all okay to vote on that. Quick question. Do we need to approve it as part of the constitution, just that we agree with the process, because I couldn't see us.
I think that we are merely approving it because of our continued role in the fact that it provides for there to be full council representatives, so it seems appropriate.
No, that's fine.
That we're happy with that constitution.
So we have a proposal, we had a second, are we all happy to vote on that constitution, the UCI anything?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 22-10907, to resolve the mayor writes to the chief executive of the NHS Northamptonshire Integrated Care Board and the Lakeside Animal Medical Practice to arrange a meeting. We have a document, I think this, Rupert, I think this was from you, is that right?
Yes, indeed. I originated that. Can I say a few words?
Please do.
Now, the fact is that the population of Arundel is increasing. Some 200 new houses at least are coming on stream, and for some months now, the practice has been struggling to cope, not only with COVID demand, but others. We know that the animal medical practice across the close have carried out some reconfiguration of the existing space to rationalise it, which looks very efficient. But they have also been looking at the feasibility of expanding upwards, which of course it costs. Now, coincidentally, the practice of cut have just come within the ambit of the Northamptonshire, the NHS Northamptonshire Clinical Commission Group as their feudal overlords. It so happens the animal medical practice, being a GP-funded practice, operate at arm's length from the Clinical Commission groups, which means that as and when they need more big money, they need to come along cap in hand to the Clinical Commission group. So, given that the Northamptonshire Clinical Commission Group had very many cares and calls, I reckon in discussion with colleagues here that it would be sensible for us as the town council with an interest in the well-being of our law to get the ball rolling started quickly by having a tripartite meeting with a small delegation of Arundel Town councillors, say 3, plus the town clerk, to meet an equivalent number of senior people from the practice, namely the medical head, Dr. Newell, and the administrative head, Simon Easley, and the chief executive of the NHS Northampton Commission Group, plus whatever satellites you want to bring with them. A tripartite meeting, so that both sides can put their cards on the table and ventilate it out, so that in the event the Clinical Commission Group pull a long face and say they're very short of money indeed, they might have to go cap in hand to the Department of Health, they're feudal super lords, then obviously we get our MP on the case and get things moving in good time before the population starts expanding over much.
Thank you, Rupert. Any questions, queries, thoughts on us writing? I would say that we've been trying to get a meeting with the practice manager at the surgery since January last year. The last one resigned to avoid talking to us. So I think it's certainly something we've been trying to do, but it's hard to get all the important people in the room together. I'm more than happy to write if everyone thinks it's a good idea.
I'm more than happy to support. Again, I think that trying to get these people in a room is what's proving difficult, and what level of responsibility we can pull. But the amount of complaints that I hear, and that's before, as you say, we have the building side. I'm obviously going through the maternity side at the moment, which has been cut completely from outdoors.
Really?
And it's something that I would jump on, to be honest, because it's the service is not there. And knowing that it's going to grow further is extraordinary. But again, it's knowing, trying to get the right people in the room and to push that through is going to be very difficult.
Absolutely. Jerry?
I just want to echo what Rep said. I mean, it's a big issue with people in the town, and I bet we've got to keep trying, even if it doesn't get anywhere.
I'd flip it on its head and say I've experienced the other side as to how good the surgery is. In terms of, I think, post-COVID, I think there had to be a sea change as to how we, as customers of doctor's surgery, adapted to the new way, if that's something. Whereas before you made an appointment, if you got an appointment, you'd go, you would sit in there, you'd go through your appointment, everybody would be sitting there, be really, really busy. The appointments I've had in more recent months, I've done via their chat. And that experience with that has been really good for me. You know, I put there the drugs I needed and all those sorts of issues. I actually told them what I needed. The fact they hadn't contacted me was one issue, but I then drove the sort of the need. And within 24, 48 hours, as it was written on the chat, I was contacted and said, yeah, can we arrange an appointment for you, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's that, I think we not us, but I think possibly the surgery setup probably hasn't managed that in the way post-COVID, I'll say post-COVID, because pre-COVID, you know, it was so much different. But knowing friends that are in the medical profession, they say that a lot of people don't actually need to see a doctor, and they don't actually need to be in the same room. And if we all sort of adapted a different way of how we contacted our doctor, I'm not saying that, you know, I take Rupert's point, you know, we are growing as a town, and we need the service. You know, it's not that long ago we talked about the possibility we might have needed another doctor's surgery because of the amount of people that are going to be in the town, especially when you have other care facilities and whatever other be owned. So I think that's a different issue, but I think the key has to be what can we offer to assist them? And if there is anything we can offer to assist them by way of pressure being put on our district and also our further down the food chain, MPs and the like, and yeah, that's something we should do. But as I say, my experience of the doctors has been probably slightly different to some other people.
Just to touch up on that, I think one of the points that came out of the LAPS meeting last Friday was this is not just an Amber experience.
Yeah, it is
it's
across.
Yeah, perhaps some people were saying.
So just a question related to point 2 here. If the practice has already received conditional approval from one group, clinical commissioning group, and they're now under the ambit of Northamptonshire, have they actually applied to Northamptonshire? Well, the thought that we're trying to get a meeting in the diary between all 3 groups, laudable as that may be, won't be getting in the way of they're making an application to the Northamptonshire CCG.
My
So
understanding
as that process has already started, will we be diverting attention by having this tripartite meeting?
I suspect we've got to get the meeting first. I think the argument is that now they are part of Northampton, have been since June, July, maybe. And it's a slow process, but there were 2 members from PPG from Arundel and Thrapston and somewhere else in the LAPS meeting. And they were making the point that it's all started, but at the moment it has yet to really get underway. So I suppose there's an argument saying we're taking time away from that, but also maybe would be a good time to direct it, I suppose. Because certainly the impression I had from one of the LAPS meetings comments was that he'd never been to Arundel, never been here before, and he's one of the health information guys to do with this. So it can't really harm, I suppose.
Well, so the follow-up to that is, have we asked the local practice whether they would want our help, or are we just presuming that they want our help?
We met with Mike Richardson, who was the CEO of Lakeside when we met in, that was January, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And had a chat, and he was more than happy, and that's why he asked us to set up a meeting with their practice manager in order to start, even if it was just communicating the positive things from the surgery, etc. That took 6 months, and we didn't get any further with that. So I think the general view is that they weren't averse to working with us. In terms of our location, we've got the hub facility here, we've got rooms here, it would seem like a natural synergy.
Well, and I think the point raised, that sensible is looking at the services as well, that it is, yes, it's the expansion of the surgery and how indeed it's modernised, but it's the services that are provided, which, as I say, for first-hand experience, I couldn't even get blood taken here, I had to go to Corby, which is extraordinary for a surgery the size of Oundle, serving Oundle. And I think it is then looking at all of the services that have left and what, as a town, we really want to fight to try and bring back. I've spoken to midwives who have been sent out to Corby who are quite upset actually that they don't have a place in Oundle anymore. And it's just interesting to try and separate what is provided by the GPs and how that is tackled and what services are provided.
Just on that basis, again, this LAPS conversation last week, local area partnerships, was sort of themed around that. What does the community want from the integrated care system board, had lots of different things. But I think the argument is a lot of those decisions are already being taken centrally. And certainly the point you were raising about going for blood cells, that's where the minibuses came in, the transport issue. Because if you don't drive an hour,
I don't.
and you can't get a hold of the VA drivers, who are then being taken in 3 different ways, and people with Trapstone who are iterating this, and Rawns and Russian, saying that at the moment, decisions are being taken that are sending people in multi different directions, and there's no means for them to access that. So I've got this exciting leaflet that tells me a lot of data on it, but one of the big things was the only proportion of lower super output areas by quintiles of deprivation, that's what Charles called it, that we have in rural East Northants is barriers. And that's because people can't access the services that the council provides. And that's exactly that. So even if we ended up talking to the ICS or partnership, whoever we end up talking to, about the fact that we want to minimise those barriers, that could at least help the local area partnership. Lisa?
Well, I was going to say, even if the practice did manage to expand the actual building, so there was more opportunity for facilities, additional facilities, my understanding is from having been on the PPG, is that there is a national shortage of medical staff and doctors in particular, and I know at the moment there's at least 2 doctor vacancies at the surgery. So even if they've got a facility in terms of the building, it's happening everywhere. And I don't know whether it's cost of housing in Oundle that stops them being able to attract the available GPs that there are. I'm not sure of the answer, but
That was certainly touched on the Chronicle article about the surgery.
yeah,
They've
Yeah.
been waiting for 2 years to fill those vacancies.
yeah.
I mean, maybe we write and reiterate our offer of help from earlier in the year with this as a basis and see what they come back and say. I'm more than happy to try something along those lines. Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for raising that, Rupert. 22-10908 to elect members onto committees of the town council. I suppose this is primarily after a couple of meetings having enough to take place.
Yes, and also just to really ratify that Councillor Wade would like to join the Finance Committee, which you're still at Carrie Back. And also, one of the things that I'd forgotten was that Councillor Arnold had become the new head of estates, which automatically puts you on the committee, the Finance Committee.
Oh.
And had I have sent you and you'd been able to come, then we possibly would have been quorum, but I didn't. It was just a miscommunication with myself and Lisa that.
So basically, we've got 2 new members of finance.
And it's also, I mean, planning has struggled the last few.
And the States is going to struggle.
Yeah.
Sorry. For maternity. So no pressure on you three. Really fun. you like to volunteer for anything?
I've already volunteered.
Yeah.
To Max and to
Well, if we can, we'll apply some gentle pressure.
Can I simply encourage new councillors to visit those committee meetings? This is all very well talking about in the abstract, but come along and see as an observer, a bit like Max did with the museum. If you think you've got something to contribute and you'd like to join us, the committees would be very grateful. Certainly having attempted to chair the MGP meeting in our meeting in their absence, for it to be abandoned because it wasn't for it. Following the previous week where I tried to chair a planning committee meeting, which was abandoned because it wasn't for it, I'm rather keen on the idea of getting people onto committees.
Absolutely. So,
could I let circulate those dates then so we can see that?
the meetings. Yes, sir.
Are they broadcast online?
They're all
They're
on, they're all on,
They're
the
on
Yeah.
Town Council calendar for meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, and talking of finance, let's move on. Oh, sorry,
Can I just ask, how do we go about volunteering for a committee?
volunteer, that sounds like a volunteer.
Well,
That's been my
You just
skills.
have.
As we've got this agenda item,
Itself to personnel, I don't know if there's
So,
a personnel committee.
There is a personnel committee.
there is a personnel
Yeah.
committee, yeah.
I think Lisa should definitely be on that. because
So
it's
I would
personality
volunteer for
skills.
that, but I don't.
Okay, that's fine. Mhm.
We need to vote on that.
Well, I'll just write that in now, just in case
Yeah.
we get to a personnel committee and you've not been. So I'll put you down on that one.
Okay.
That one doesn't meet as regularly as the other committees.
I'll have a look at
Yeah.
the list and-
I mean, I'm happy to go and again observe a finance or planning committee, but I don't really feel that I can do both.
No, that's fine.
It's a question of where the demand is.
Well, finance looks like it's covered, now Jamie's volunteering. Mary's volunteering. Planning or estates would be about helping.
I'd like to recommend planning because there was a time when all councillors attended planning. I mean, planning came up at all council meetings. It is a brilliant way of actually learning about the town and the issues, the particular issues. So I can thoroughly recommend.
Despite being the new
The chair. of the
chair
estates.
of the states, I would like to take a lot of answers.
Great.
Estates is also-
I know. I feel like but planning is, to me, it's been immensely mind-blowing
Yeah.
in its depth, and a lot of that's to do with Councillor Chapel.
In actual fact, the terms of reference are that the whole council, if they wanted to go be on the committee, can be. So you could all be
Right.
members.
Just make every Tuesday a full meeting. Let's see how next month goes. So, in terms of coming on to next meetings, we can talk later about.
Okay,
So 22-110, financial matters, just aware of time. 22-11001, approved bank reconciliation, balance sheet and budget for November 2022. There's the current account balance, as it were, and savings account balance. Any questions or queries about any of those things? I'm happy to propose that we approve them. As long as David seconded, are we okay to approve those and vote? Lovely, thank you very much indeed. 22-11002, payments for November 2022. The proposition is schedule of payments for November 2022 as presented at this item are paid. I was going to raise another issue, then I'll do that in a minute. Are there any questions or queries about the payments?
So, it's not about payments, I'm perhaps a little bit late for this question. Which agenda item covers the aged debtors? Is that the first one? As part of the balance sheet?
Probably would be 22.
It's all encompassed in that whole.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in that case, I'm sorry, I do have a question. Is it too late?
It might be this
Or
time.
perhaps an observation?
Observation will be fine, and next month we can dig down a bit deeper.
The observation is that we have 20% of debts due to us over 3 months old, and 40% of debts owed to us over 2 months old. And so it'd be interesting to know what the terms of trade are and what our debt execution policy is.
When's the next finance meeting? Is it January or February?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
I don't know what our debtor management policy is. We have 20% of debtors over 3 months old and 40% over 2 months old, which seems quite high to me.
Some of these, sometimes it does depend when, because obviously Paul has to get the information out so that you've got it available before this meeting. Quite often, what can happen is a lot of those payments will have come in between.
If they're more than 3 months old, it's probably less likely. But we can pick
Yeah,
up
a couple of
it's
the-
just
I know a
observation
couple of
in
the
terms
ones-
cash management.
Is it worth getting Paul's?
Yeah, I can talk to you about those ones that are at the end. There's a,
This is,
Yeah.
sorry. Cool, so, going on to 22-10110.02, the proposition schedule of payments is presented, are paid. Any questions or queries on those? I'm happy to propose that we pay them. Anyone willing to second it? John needs to talk about that first. So we're all happy to vote on that. Thank you very much indeed. 22-110.03, this was going to come before finance last week. It's come to us to consider a proposal to have a coronation community grant fund. This came out of a couple of conversations over the last couple of months about the coronation in May, whether we wanted to put on another large event in the centre of town. And there's hope to put something on Fleck Field and the idea of a sort of village coronation fete. So it seemed foolish to try and double book that weekend. The idea that came forward is that we put aside a sum of money from our grant budget, either our existing grant budget or a slightly increased grant budget, to open a coronation community grant fund. The idea being, and it's sort of involved there in the middle of it, that all the clubs and groups that helped us with the Jubilee event last year could effectively apply for something, ideally that has a legacy in some way, shape or form, and do something that weekend, or some other time later in the year. And we'd be able to approve those, which would allow more groups around the town to do something that can effectively support the event on Fleck Field on that weekend. Obviously there are budgetary implications, and I've put some ideas down there as to how we might cover it. It might lead to an increase in the amount we put in the budget. We've got 20,000 in the grant budget at the moment, which we might think is enough. We might decide later on to pull more from reserves if applications come forward, but we don't know if they will. So we were hoping to do the nitty-gritty last week, but we didn't. So has anyone got any thoughts or ideas on this? It seemed a nice thing to sort of sell to the town of us doing something useful and also encourage some buy-in from everyone and hopefully put something useful into the various clubs and groups that we have in town that already do a lot of good things. Jenny?
The only thing I want to say is I support the idea of the fund. I think it's really good.
Thank you very much. Anything from anyone else? John?
Just we need to get on with it because it's December. If you're all talking grants by February, then there's only 3 months to organise it, or less, 2.5 months. So don't have time to.
Well, if we improve it tonight, it's been on social media.
Yeah, how much are you thinking?
Well, I've mentioned in this paper 10,000.
Because that would have to come out of this year's budget. So we would have to agree where that money was going to come from.
Which I've raised
And,
down here as well. So we might just ring fence a particular amount of any underspend from this year's budget. So because effectively some of the applications we need to be before the next finance committee, which is February the 8th. So, which is feasible. Again, presumably Rebecca could put this out tomorrow on social media. And it could be in the next advertising.
But we haven't really got a sort of policy for this particular grant scheme and how we've got a general grant policy, but
Yeah,
we
and
haven't.
we've
So
said
we
in
need
it-
to really have something down on paper.
Well, that's what this document was meant to be. The idea is we give it according to the present grant policy as well.
Are we going to put a limit for each person, or are we going to? Is it going to be 50% of whatever the money they're looking for?
Well, I think I was going to cover some of the points that Emma's just done, in that before I think we rush it out on social media. I think we've got to be clear about exactly what it is that we want to give money to, and give some indication of the amounts that people might be able to expect, and the sorts of things that we would be including in the umbrella or under the umbrella that we would want to fund. I think putting something on social media prematurely might have a bit of a negative effect. I think we've just got, I fully support the idea, but I think some of the detail needs to be worked out a little bit about who we want, particularly the sums involved and the kinds of activities that we want to receive applications for. The danger is otherwise people might just put in stuff that we have to reject out of hand.
Yeah.
Or can we just agree in principle and it goes back to the finance committee to sort out what it looks like in terms of reference, and then bring back to, have we got time to bring back to a future meeting?
Well, yeah, it
Sign
would
off,
absolutely, I mean, technically, we could perhaps look at it and then have something for full council in January, because that would come before the finance meeting, so
I'd like a bit more detail as well.
Yeah. and it needs to follow the lines of our current grant policy. But obviously it's going to be slightly different because it's a sort of one-off grant. It's not our normal grant.
I mean, behind it in principle, I share concerns about setting off before we really know where we're trying to get to. But perhaps the key is, if this is a legacy thing, it's not like it has to happen and be spent on the day of the coronation itself. We could be looking at projects throughout the whole of our next financial year. And if we were looking at it in that way, trying to get something out just before Christmas is probably not appropriate. We didn't manage to have our finance meeting in last week, which perhaps if we had, a lot of these things might have been thrashed out, we might be a bit further forward. It might be possible, I'll put it no higher than that, to have an extraordinary finance meeting with just this one item on the agenda, so that we can have a chat about that prior to maybe even a January full council meeting. I'd like to get on with it, but I think other councillors are right. If we don't have very clear criteria for what we're looking for and how much we're prepared to grant to any one thing, and what is a legacy and all the rest of it, we might just find that we're handing out money hand over fist, and we don't really get from it what we want. Right?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think it's very sensible. I wonder if it's worth maybe just considering for Fletton Field, in that if they do want to do something to mark the coronation, considering the amount that they have done over the last year, whether it is right to try and secure a grant for them in that respect, if they need to move forward with planning to do whatever it is they want to do.
We still have money in this year's grant budget, I think, don't we?
Sorry?
We still have money in this year's grant budget?
Yes, yeah, we do. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly. I think it's possibly in the region of about 7,000, but I need to have a look.
So general view is principle like detail needs doing. We just need to think about the timing. So the next finance meeting is in February. The next full council meeting is on the 17th of January, which has a QBH meeting before it. So we could do an extraordinary finance meeting before that.
I just support what Councillor Chappell said about having an extraordinary finance meeting. We didn't have one last week. Two other pieces, if I may. One is we talk about how we give money out and the process for doing that. We still have to find money within this year's budget. I'd appreciated that, so thank you. And that's the job it seems to be for Finance and General Purchase Committee. So the two could be rolled into one. But there's a subsidiary question, which is have we received any applications for our existing grants budget? Is there a demand?
We have, but not for
Yes.
things related to the coronation.
So the question remains, to what extent is there demand for additional grant funds if there is still money in the existing grants budget and we haven't had any particular application beyond that?
Could I just perhaps point out that the requests for grant funding we've had would have far exceeded our overall budget. The reality is there are a number of grant applications we've had that we haven't granted at all, and others where we've only granted part of what's been asked for, which is why there is still some money, in fact, left in the kitty.
But have those grants been in respect of the coronation?
No,
No.
none of it, as far as I am aware, would be to do with that specifically, but there again, the board hasn't actually intimated that that was something you could apply for. Perhaps it's not surprising. But I do take Councillor Dewar's point that the Fletton Field group may very well want to do something on that field for the coronation and might want to come to us for some support. My recollection is that the amount that we put into the Jubilee is actually quite substantial at the end of the day. It probably exceeds that 7,000 figure.
I
But
think
if they've got
a smaller plan.
that, exactly, and that underspend, the current underspend, because of course we've still got quite a bit of the financial year left, but that current underspend might very well go a long way towards meeting the Fletton Field Group's aims, assuming that they have some.
I think one of the points,
I'm just, you speak on where I'm the council representative on the Fletton Fields Association Committee. I've not yet seen a proposal against what can be done, so I know that the chair, Paul Eby, is very keen to get something to us as a proposal, but I've not actually seen what that is yet. And obviously it needs the support of a wider group of you that deliver it. So they're not, we're not, as far as I'm aware, we're not banging on the door just yet saying,
No.
this is what we want and this is what it's going to cost and this is how we're going to do it.
but I think was the Jubilee showed that the marshalling costs around the town were relatively expensive, so if it's just on the field, that will be less money.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So generally, principles there, detail needs sorting out, and perhaps we can sort that out in January, ready for something for the February finance meeting. Is that okay? Just broadly, I can reword things, if that's okay with everyone, on that particular things.
Yeah.
I can add in quantities and what legacy is. Do we have any broad limits on what we think that the maximum grant should be, or just try and be as vague as possible?
What's our current, do we have a maximum in the current scheme now?
No, that's why I try to keep it existing with what our existing policy is. So reinventing the wheel.
It depends what people ask.
That's right. And you see, in a way, if people come forward and maybe sound about what their ideas are over the year, then we'll know what's what, but I'll try and draft it a bit better.
Okay.
22-110-04, approve the balancing grant for Queen Victoria Hall. It's just one of the spreadsheets, I couldn't quite work out what the balancing grant was.
No, it's part of the budget, and this is what was agreed at the QVH meeting, but then because obviously the QVH is asking town council for a considerable amount of money, the town council really needs to consider that now and decide whether you want to give them the money or not.
So this was the estimated grant for next year to the QVH, £22,000, which was lower than this year, which is £26,000, which we came up with at the last QVH meeting. Any questions or queries about it? Are we okay to, I'm happy to propose that we go ahead with that grant. David's happy to second it. We're all happy to vote on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thank you very much indeed. Draft budget for 2023 and 2024. As I say, apologies, this wasn't sorted last week. I'll take the time for being in Berlin. In essence, the Finance Committee previously sort of looked at some broad tenets, and they were that we're up for a large increase in our electricity bill sometime next year when our contract ends. So we in the budget, double electricity costs, double gas costs. We also know that there will be a salary uplift, but we don't know what it'll be, so we've hopefully estimated about 7.5% for that. And we've tried to minimise other increases. I think we're going to try and avoid the preset plan above 5%. Does that ring a bell? All right. And that's sort of where we ended up with this document here. I'm not sure we have time to go line by line tonight, but
No, I mean, hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at it. I tried to get it out as soon as possible after we didn't have the finance meeting. And also the information that Paul had received that actually told us what our Band D figure was going to be. So we would have more of an idea. And looking at whether we agree to go with 5% increase on Band D, or whether you agree to have a 5% increase on the preset, just means that we've got a little bit more money to play with either way.
As a council representative on the Museum Trust, can I report back that at the last meeting of the Museum Trust, not the extraordinary meeting last Monday, but at the full meeting 2 weeks ago now, there was a request that the council consider letting the museum off some of all of its rent. It's having a period at the moment where its income doesn't quite match its expenditure. Whilst it has some limited reserves, it is concerned that unless the situation can be successfully addressed, it's going to start running into difficulty at some point. It's got a number of plans to how to address these issues and to try and increase income from various sources, although it is slightly hampered by the lack of lease agreement in terms of trying to access and grant funding. And it's undoubtedly the case that if the museum didn't have to find the £1,400 that it currently pays to OTC for the rent of the space of the museum, it would be in a better place. I should perhaps add, by way of counterbalance, that there was a period of time when this council looked at the courthouse, worked out basically how much space there was in it, tried to calculate therefore what each space was costing the council, tried to then work out rents on the basis of that, took one look at what that would have done to the museum rent, and decided not to do it so far as the museum was concerned, because it occupies quite a large chunk of that building. So it doesn't represent anything remotely approaching commercial rent currently, but it would be a help, and it's basically, I was asked to put it on the basis of a one-off. This is not something where they're saying we don't want to pay a rent in the future. What they're saying is it would be helpful in this coming year if you didn't have to find the rent, or perhaps some portion of it. So I thought we'd put it out there because it will have a minor impact on a budget of that size, but nevertheless it has some impact.
so just to be clear, the museum pays £1,435 and 10p. Where the 10p's come from, I'm not sure. Get a 10p in. Jerry?
Yeah, I wonder if it's more appropriate rather than decide that now to invite them to put in their grant application next year.
That seems to be our go-to thing, isn't it? Any other thoughts on the museum? Joe? Jamie?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with, why not?
Wouldn't it be the other tenants of ours would then wonder
Yeah.
why we couldn't let them off the rent?
Do you want a museum or not? That's how I would look at it.
I would agree, but then we've said in the last year or so that other tenants would say, why don't we then get a reduction, we not, so maybe a grant application would be a smart move.
There's a slight difference between our situation, I'm talking in the museum now, and the other tenants, in that the museum is, if you like, a vehicle of the council. You know, we help to set it up. we're not commercial tenants in that sense.
Any contrary views or pro? So, without having a vote, it seems a bit divisive. Let's quickly check what we think we should be looking at. A rent holiday for a year or a grant application?
Just thought you're talking about grant applications. I don't know what the budget is. I can't find it in here. But if we're talking at £10,000, we're talking a large sum of that.
The grant budget for next year will be £20,000.
I support grant application from the museum.
Grant application.
Joe,
Max, any thoughts? Grant application or rent holiday?
Um,
Difficult for you. Sit on the fence.
I think there are advantages if we can give them a rent holiday.
I'll go for rent holiday simply because I prefer to keep the grant money pure for grants. And as Councillor Chester said, I can't say without my concern, they're not a commercial tenant, they're a cultural output. And so that would be an argument against any other tenant saying, well, we're, can we be a top tenant? So I'll go for rent holiday.
Grant application.
Great.
I'm really sitting on the fence, if I'm honest.
It's there to sit on.
Can I sit on it?
Yeah.
I'll sit on the
General.
fence.
Rent holiday.
Grant.
I think as I already said, I'm in favour of grant. I mean, and also why not link it to coronation as well? I mean, they could make their major display coronation linked. And,
I tend to agree, grant.
All grant, and
Grant holiday, I think.
rent holiday. I'm going to say, that's a good thing.
Have you been counting?
Roughly, sorry, I should have just maybe said this before. Just put it in context, virtually every museum in the country is struggling at the moment post-COVID.
Absolutely.
And, this is not just about Arndal, this is about the cultural sector, which is in huge need of support at the moment. They need time to recover from COVID, and if this buys them time, then I think it's well worth the investment.
I think contrary to that isn't the argument there, but we do have other cultural and tenants who are sort of might argue it's saying the fact we have a particular involvement in the museum does make it slightly unique.
I think on that point then, so by actually giving them a grant, we're actually saying we're supporting the cultural event that's in the town. By not saying, because I think it sends the wrong message if we're giving them a rent-free holiday. But if you say, well, we're giving them a grant to support the museum and the cultural events that are in town. That's just
Lita, you can't vote, we haven't had a vote yet. Do you have any thoughts, rent holiday?
I agree with Councillor Davies, actually. I think that's a very good point. You brought that down.
So, Jamie?
Do we have any other cultural tenants, if you like?
We have other tenants who might argue that they're charitable.
We have
or
charitable
cultural.
ones, yeah, we have ones that do
It's
a
a
lot
grey
for
area,
charity.
And I think we've avoided it for exactly that reason.
Chat would be.
Yes.
the
Yeah, huge one.
same building.
So I'm going to propose, if that's okay, that we encourage the museum to apply for a grant next year equal to their rent, with a particular focus on the coronation, which ticks lots of boxes and gets them to the same place. Yeah. So I'm happy to propose it. Paul seconded it. You vote on that?
Yeah.
Anyone against?
Okay.
No, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for bringing to our attention.
I'll relay that back to the club.
So in terms of the budget, really directors, but it does mean that that income stream in theory stays there. I think unless anyone has any particular issues with the line by line issues, are we broadly happy with those parameters, allowing for a large increase in electricity costs next year, unless miracles happen, and a large increase in gas costs, allow for probably a likely salary situation for the staff, and to allow for a 5% preset, which at the moment on this proposal would put about 20,000 from reserves, I seem to recall, into the budget, but there may be an underspending this year's budget. How do we do this, Emma? Do we need to vote on it and vote on the precept?
Yes, you do. So, let me just open my spreadsheet. Right, at the moment, you've got a figure at the bottom of that spreadsheet that's £547,099, and that works out at 4.3 increase. If we take off, if we're looking at having a 5% precept, then we'll be taking £725.56 out of that reserves figure, brought forward reserves figure. And that would then put our precept at £547,824.90.
And this is because more houses have come on stream this year.
Yeah,
For my money, I think that little bit of extra headroom is worth having, particularly with the uncertainty about wages and gas, etc. We're hopefully sort of advertising up to 6% precept rise, a 5% precept rises.
yeah. So if we go for the 5% precept, we've got an extra £3,675. So that would put the precept at £550,774.34, and that would be a 5% increase.
Which gives us that little bit of extra headroom.
Yeah.
Because I don't think some of the salary figures on this spreadsheet are 7.5%, I think they're 5%. So that seems prudent, that gets us to the number here. So we need to vote on that number, and
Yes, please, and the percentage at 5% at Band D increase.
so what was the number again?
Precept of £550,774.34.
550,000.
774.
So thank you very much. So I'm happy to propose that we set our budget at £550,774.34. Seconded, are we going to vote on that? Yep. Thank you very much. And our precept at 5% increase. I'm happy to propose that. Lady seconded, are we going to vote on that as well?
Presumably it has to go up, doesn't it?
does.
I'm ignorant on this, so
Yeah,
I don't.
it does to make the budget balance. Absolutely. We've got increased utility costs of about £54,000 next year.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but every household also has that.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's
That's
not
why,
only,
that's why we tried 5%.
If you want, right, let me just change these figures around.
Perhaps whilst Carl's doing that, just as an observation, having sort of seen the budgeting process over 36 years on the council, whenever we've decided to freeze the precept, the inevitable result the following year has been a quite significant rise.
right,
And I think that we've tended in recent years, therefore, to feel that modest increases
is it better?
is a better way of doing it than having these sort of peaks and troughs that we have sometimes had.
So we froze it pretty much in 21-22. Last year was about 5% this year. So some of the figures down here are 17-20% rises.
Right.
The drops the previous year.
Just to give you an idea, that increase would mean for a Band D figure, so obviously anybody lower than that is going to be paying less, would be £12.78 a year. So I know it's an increase, but it's quite
Yeah, no, I
large.
just think it is, out of ignorance, I think it's worth just querying,
Absolutely.
that.
I think the £50,000 utility bill is that's really £1,008, which is unavoidable. And it might be worse than that. We don't know what the numbers will be in June.
Okay, thank you.
I think in terms of talking about it publicly, that £12.78 figure is quite a good one to use. Because people realise that that's actually all they're paying towards the town council. They're not actually worried too much about where their money's going.
And that's what I think is required, because if you're not interested in how these things actually
Financially,
work,
Yeah.
minded, thank you, it's good to be reminded or encouraged to think about it in that respect. It's about what it represents, I think.
So do we need to vote on that 5% please? I think we sort of.
I thought you, I've done, yeah, you've done,
That's
yeah.
fine, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed, and sorry to get into the long weeds there, but there we go. 22-11006 to approve the insurance quote. We've got two quotes in front of us, one from Hallam, our existing brokers, and one from Zurich. They're both there or thereabouts. The Zurich one does offer a 3-year contract, as it were, which is about £2,000 a year cheaper. But on my initial quick squiz of it yesterday, they also seem to undervalue quite a lot of our buildings by, I think, up to about £750,000, which maybe a little bit less, but there we go. So, any thoughts on Hallam versus Zurich? It was the third quote they.
Yeah, for councils, there, you can't just go to every insurance company, there's only a certain number of insurance companies. And the other one that I went to then wouldn't quote because they use Aviva, which is our current broker, that's who we'll be with, so they wouldn't quote against each other. So I was unable to get a third in the time.
Just as an observation, I think we've dipped in and out of Zurich as our insurers over the years, because I can certainly remember times when the policy was the Zurich one. But I suspect if we went to them and said, look, you're undervaluing our buildings, so will you please effectively revalue them, then it's going to become more expensive than the other quotes. So I'm tempted to say stick with the one we're with at the minute.
The danger, of course, with insurance is you can go on price, but until you need to call on it. Certainly, if I was looking at these two as an independent person buying my own insurance, the Hallam, the way it looks much fuller, much more powerful.
So, a number of observations from having worked in the insurance industry for a while. Aviva quite often give guarantees of premiums for subsequent years. I don't know if that's something that's been explored.
Certainly Zurich appear to be offering it on theirs.
Zurich are, but I didn't see that in Aviva, so it might be worth asking whether they will or not. We have excluded, it seems to me, in the Aviva one, cyber liability and crime. Is that a deliberate policy, or has that just been missed out? Because I know from other experiences, cyber liability is a big deal and very costly if it happens.
So I can't hear what you're saying.
We've avoided cyber
We've
liability.
avoided taking.
Well, we've not
cyber
looked into that
liability
yet, but it is
and
something that we could, and maybe should look at.
I highly recommend
Yeah.
being in a situation where cyber crime and cyber liability is being taken on, so I think we should have it. I think crime, particularly in the current market, is something that we should look for. I know that business travel has been excluded, although you go on business travel. You
Yeah,
travel
but we,
on behalf of the
through expenses,
You
yeah.
go- You travel on behalf of the council, so that's a risk that we're taking. It's not covered in
No.
Aviva. And yeah, so I've noted the valuations in Shortfall apparently in Zurich, so I would stick with Aviva, but I would take on that additional cover.
Yeah, it is. I've talked to our brokers about that, the cyber security. So that's something that we can look at in the new year.
I'll do what we look at it, I'll take it on.
Okay, so do we need to, if we were to take it on, this is due 23rd of January, isn't it? Will we be able to get a report back on that on the 17th next full council?
I would sooner secure
Yeah,
this
no, absolutely,
now,
yeah.
and then I can just act on that. Yeah.
Excellent. Is it also worth just asking about the Aviva, say Zurich have given us a sort of a 3-year option, can Aviva? give us-
They've said they won't, not in the current climate.
Have we asked them whether they'll give a discount for no claims or no claims?
Having spoken to the broker, the person that I speak to, this is the best deal that they've offered at the moment.
Has the broker asked for a discount?
I can ask. But if you agree to this quote, then at least I can go back and,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So, is anyone against staying with James Hallam? It seems the best cover overall. No?
The only question I was going to ask is, having dealt with them before, are we actually happy with their customer service and
Yeah.
everything?
This council's been with, they're under various different names, this broker for a long time. They know us, they know everything that we do. They're really helpful. All I have to do is ring up, you know, if there's anything like we've been doing on Fletton Field, any new events that we do, and they help us with
I
that.
think that's important, so
Yeah,
probably
they are
best
really
not to
good.
jump ship.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is somebody to speak to, and they also come out and visit as well. So.
Yeah, no, that's, I didn't know what the back history was, but you've just convinced me
Yeah.
of it, so.
So I'm happy to propose that we go with the Aviva quote through James Hallam, and we ask about the discount, and we ask about cyber liability to reflect on that generally. Anyone who seconded? David seconded, we're all happy to vote on that. Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for giving us a source, Emma. To approve receipt of the completed AGAR for 21-22.
Yeah, it's a bit late coming back, should have been back 30th of September, but they did send an interim report to say that they hadn't completed, but it was all completed without any issues raised.
So
It's not.
this is 20 minutes in hand.
Didn't you have it?
But it's the same as the last.
It's the same as what you have had, yeah, but it's
Do
just
we
not,
need to vote on that, or do we
why
need
is
to?
it not there?
We've got 21-110-06 and 08. Unless I misplaced it somewhere.
Sorry about that, I'll make sure you've got it, but yeah, it's the one that you've signed, yeah, and it's just come back
So do
with
we need
there
to
are no
vote on that, or
issues.
just?
You just have to sort of vote that you've received it, but you haven't received it,
Receive it.
and I will send it out to you tomorrow. It is on the notice board outside and it is on the website, and if you want to have a quick look at it now, to just say you've seen it.
It's on the website. Is it 21-22? So this is the website.
Yeah, it should be at the top of the finance page.
So this is one we saw most of last time, didn't we?
Yeah, that's when they sent us the interim report to say that they hadn't completed it. And then we received the completed one.
And there's nothing coming up from recommendation on that.
Mhm.
Okay, so are we have, okay, just to murmur our consent that we've seen on our website.
Thank you.
Lovely.
I looked at you, sure.
We don't so much on, we've all murmured consent on that. To approve the internal control checklist for quarter two. Jerry, thank you again for doing that. Give them a note at the bottom valiantly that it would be nice to have another control.
Yeah, do we, didn't you go back one last?
Yes, yeah,
Just wanna
that's
check
the way,
that.
yeah.
Excellent. I've written John down, there wasn't a question. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for keeping a check on that. 22-11009 to consider the green pension contribution to the Northamptonshire Pension Fund. I found this slightly baffling. I looked at it, it all looks very nice, but I'm not sure what we need to approve, or it just seems to be that the fund's grown slightly.
Yeah, and you're just proving that your contribution's gone down slightly.
From 24.9%
Yeah.
to 24.8% or something, so. Yep.
Yeah.
That's lovely. To consider and agree, so we don't need to agree, that's two. Do you want to pay more? No, that's fine. 22-110, receive notification of the external auditor appointment. This is done through MNC. And we were offered the option to buy in, buy out of it last time, which we chose to stay in. And the auditor has stayed the same. I think. So we've received that, and we've received the annual review of the scheme governance report, the Aviva pension scheme, which most of our staff will do. So we've received that as well. Thank you very much indeed. 22-111 highways matters to receive an update on the 20-mile-an-hour advisory side. This is the thing we spoke about in November. I walked around Sarah Barn a few days later. I've stuck a report in here Her general view is that it's absolutely fine, she's very happy with the idea of it. She then sent through a rather more formal version saying you've got to do this, that, the other. When I clarified that, she said, yeah, that's what we've done already. So it's sort of a really informal, formal view of what's what. The essence is they've got no problems with us putting some advisory 20-mile-an-hour signs around the town centre and other locations was their suggestion. And we talked about West Street, we talked about, I've got it down here, the primary school and New Road, and she thought that would be fine. They need to have a list of where we're considering. Apparently us talking about those locations and talking about it now is that list, so that's fine. They are having some advisory 20-mile-an-hour signs made, which will have North Northampton County Council on. They're going to see if they can put our logo on as well, but if not, they will be happy to give us, or maybe sell us, but probably give us some of those signs. They're not quite sure. We can put them up and occasionally move them around the town centre to raise awareness, move them elsewhere in town as we read maybe primary school, New Road, etc. And if we then wanted to go down a further route and put an enforceable 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, we need to go through the whole consultative process. But the advisory signs, put them up and let them know we're doing it and move them and let them know. It seems very flexible, very straightforward, and they seem very much in support of us. So, if anyone's not happy with that, I suppose we need to vote on whether we like to put an advisory 20-mile-an-hour or just go ahead.
Well, if you're all happy that we go ahead with this.
We all okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're looking at putting them in what roads?
Ideally, probably West Street, Marketplace, anywhere that's on the map. We've got two people
But do we need to, on that map, right, so that's fine, yeah.
on the map. Recorded the map. But the problem is it depends how many signs we get as to where we can put them. And they don't know how
And
many
it's up to us to move them around. I thought they moved them.
Seems a little bit uncertain.
Yeah.
I think provided we tell them we're moving them, it's okay.
Because I don't think they can be there. They're not supposed to be there because they're temporary. They have to,
Yeah, that's where it gets a bit vague, but I think when we get the signs, we can clarify that.
right, okay.
Things we can't do is put them on pollution beacons and other signs, which do limit where we can put them. But at least it's a start. So we'll crack on when we hear back from her. Sorry?
Seems to be fairly central.
It is fairly central, and that's why she's
Whereas-
available.
The primary school was effectively means signs on Blackthorn Road and Colchester Road. The primary advantage of Colchester Road would be to also covers some areas with the
The primary school was Sarah's suggestion, and New Road was her suggestion as well, as areas where there are concerns about spending, which we could legitimately put them for a couple of months and then move them again. So it seemed it would be a nice partnership with highways. She seemed very happy with the idea, but it might take months to get through. So,
watch this.
yeah. To receive an update on signage, this is something that we put forward to estates, and obviously, is that from Sarah again?
Yeah, I met with her because you'd said about the signs that Thrapston had got. And she went and had a look at those and then came back and said, I don't think that they are something that we did. So I think that may be something that Thrapston have put on the bottom.
Sorry,
So, yeah, but I did say to her that we do put out the bright yellow signs on the entrances into the town when it's just before the farmers market and also just before the Thursday market. She thought that maybe they would have more attraction, something that's there and that's bright yellow, than a sign that literally is just like that, that's written underneath the town. But she was going to, excuse me, she was going to find out if it was a highways decision or how those signs had happened, and then come back. I know, I felt really bad. When,
And the other one about the footpath sign, it was the big sign actually in front of the Jones Strong Centre area. But we can worry about that.
yeah.
After Christmas. And then 22-11103 to receive the speed device sign. Lots of good news, lots of slow averages, lots of nice people being obedient. And then the less good news at the top end, including might be a new record down Clapham Road.
Personally, I think that's not going to be accurate. I think some of those outlines, I think must be low flying pig. I don't know what's triggered those, but there's something.
Well, I think it's a motorbike, and I think it was a motorbike that went along West Street, and a motorbike
I
on.
find it hard to believe that anything can achieve those sorts of speeds at 8:30 in the morning when there's cars nose to tail up down that road.
Someone suggested to me that apparently if I'm cycling behind a car, it might get behind the back end of the car and it might plot both of us together, which I was rather excited by and slightly annoyed by, so you know, as a car.
I'm not doubting the general,
Yeah,
the general picture is fine, but some of the outlines I just can't believe.
So, as per normal, please send on to the police. and just-
If they always get a copy of it.
John?
Yeah.
I think just to follow up the point made, I was going to ask how often is that device calibrated or recalibrated? Because I can't believe someone will travel at 96 miles an hour along that piece of road, even a biker. That would be a 600 feet stopping distance. It'd be a new street before it could stop.
Yeah,
So that just
luckily,
makes it bizarre.
Yeah.
So how often is it calibrated?
I don't think it's been calibrated.
No, we don't. It's not something that was recommended by the company that installed it.
But it has no power to issue any fine.
I guess the point is though that if we said these kinds of speeds are being reached, it would become laughable and therefore it reduces the effectiveness of the sign, does it?
I think the reason we had it stuck up was to try and encourage more people to try and drop below the speed limit. And I think in that area it does work.
Yeah.
Because below a certain speed, above a certain speed, I don't think you can see the smiley face.
And you can drive through it and you can calibrate it from your own car, because you can drive through it at a speed and then it will flash. Tell you.
I'm not going to do it at 96
No, and I walk down that road every morning, particularly at the kind of 8 o'clock, and some of the speeds that are going through there is incredible.
Mm.
I mean, and actually over 50, I'm not surprised that there's that many clocked.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting the overall picture. I think
Yeah.
the picture is right. I just think some of these extreme ones, I think, are a bit unbelievable.
The Santa Claus, he was late.
Right, so yeah, brilliant. Is it going to move again soon?
Yeah, I think it might move. I can't remember if we've had it on both sides of the road. Yeah, so I think we're going to put it out on Benefield folks. I've had a few people say about the speed in Benefield. We've got a list of, we can't just put it anywhere. Highways had to come out and assess everywhere where we thought, and that went on a licence. So we have a licence for the streets. If anybody comes up with any other roads that we haven't got on the licence, we then have to go back to highways. They will assess, see if it's suitable, and then add it to the licence. So we've got about, I think, 9 or 10 locations at the moment.
Thank you very much. Planning 22-112 to receive minutes from the planning committee. Yeah, I couldn't find these.
The reason you couldn't find them is because the meeting was not quorate, because there was only myself and Councillor Fuller present. Happily, we changed the terms of reference of that committee to give the chair unlimited power. Well, not exactly unlimited power, but I get the chance to basically submit representations to the planning authority on behalf of the council, just of my own initiative, if we can't get a quorum. I didn't really think it was ever going to happen, because at the end of track record, I think, of planning meetings being in court. But that's the second time since May 2021 that it's happened. As Councillor Fuller was present with me in the room, because we were anticipated before, he and I just sat down and went through them in the same way as we would always do. His views were sort of factored into the response. So responses were made to all the planning applications, but it was slightly disappointing that we weren't for it to do it. I know, for example, Councillor Chessington well, got as well, so you were as well. So I mean, it's just one of those combination of factors that things went wrong. So nothing else to report, effectively.
Thank you very much. 22-113 Estates Committee minutes. Can I find a copy of those?
I don't know what's happened with my list.
That's why I couldn't find them.
Yeah.
They were definitely on that list.
It's the power of one drive and
No.
themselves. But it says to me there was nothing particularly exciting.
Who owns the light? How could you forget?
Oh, who owns the light? The great light.
Oh, the amount of
Lightgate.
time and effort that's gone into one street light
Yeah.
And now
is,
we know who owns it.
well, yeah.
It's our light.
And that's what you say. It's been there before.
Light ownership was like.
Oh, you did, you
No, not there yet.
It's now officially being resolved. We'll fill it in.
Oh, it's quite the table. There was one thing I was going to ask though. Have we heard anything more from youth group people?
For the youth club,
Yeah.
yes, we have.
They're looking to get in January.
Yeah.
Good.
Our insurance company, were okay with them keeping their furniture in the room. But obviously they just said, make sure that you have a copy of their public liability insurance. So we've got that for our records. There was talk, I did go back to, and on a similar lines to what you said in your email, that they're going to be looking to have it 2 nights a week, but it won't be for exclusive use to start with. But we'll just see how things
See how
go.
it goes.
Yeah.
They've been having meetings with NAYC, the youth club group in
Yeah.
Northamptonshire.
Okay.
They were just putting things together the end of last week, I think.
Yeah, I
So
think
it'll
they're,
be mid-January, as I understand.
yeah.
And we've got a workshop visit.
Workshop is the 3rd of January. Looking forward to it.
Everyone's welcome.
Come on down and see the workshop in action. Thank you very much indeed. 22114 Communications Working Party, latest article for the Advertiser, which is in front of us. Thank you again to Reverend everyone for getting that sorted.
Well, just when I read it, I read it twice, I just thought the wording could be slightly improved. I'm in front of you, I'm without telling you.
What is this for?
The article for the,
Yeah, it's already been submitted now, so,
there's
yeah.
a bit in there about, I haven't got it in front of me, there's a bit in there about the electricity price increase or energy price increases, and the word rates is used, and the way I read it, I thought about rates as in council tax, rented rates. I just wondered whether that word could be changed to,
Oh, our rates are fixed.
yeah, just when I read it, I just thought it made me think twice. I just thought.
It's too late now, yeah, unfortunately.
It
It did go to the Comms Working Party, who had a look at it, but none of us picked that up.
was maybe just me.
All right. Yeah, occasionally it has to be submitted before we have this meeting. Sometimes it
Yeah, it
coincides.
just depends on the day.
Yeah,
And to report on the OTC MailChimp initiative, I put this in, it's something Rebecca started, getting people to sign up where we effectively use an email system to send them the information, which is pretty good. I received one on my private email address recently, which looks great. I found one in my town council junk mail today, which please get a junk filter sorted, but that's a common problem with that at the moment. So thanks Rebecca for pushing that.
yeah, it's going out to all councillors, so
You might need to
just check your junk and then you'll just
Check
have
your
to,
Put it in your inbox.
yeah, put it in there.
But that's okay. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Letter of thanks from Tom Perslove for Remembrance Day Parade. We've received that. Thank you very much indeed to him. Presentation from Northampton Library Council Partnership meeting on the 16th of November. There was someone from, is it Acre? That's that partnership meeting as well, isn't it? They were at the Labs meeting the other day, so there's clearly more things brewing there. And Police, Fire and Crime Commissioners Council Tax Precept Consultation Documentation, which is there. Right, and there's just 2 more items to consider, but we need to do all this. Is anyone willing to propose, or I may propose that we exclude members of the public and go along the standing orders 3C. Do we want to second it? Do we get a vote on that? Lovely, thank you very much indeed.
Right.
All good?